The delta works were not built to be used. They were built to remain idle. Construction began in 1954, following a series of storm surges that exposed the limits of existing coastal defenses in the Netherlands. What was being planned was not a response mechanism, but a preventative system. The assumption was simple and uncompromising. Failure was unacceptable. The structures that make up the delta works were designed to intervene rarely, if ever. Their success would be measured not by action, but by absence. If the system worked, nothing would happen. Much of it still stands today, maintained, operational, and largely unnoticed. The southwestern Netherlands is shaped by water. River deltas, tidal basins, and low-lying land define both its geography and its vulnerability. For centuries, coastal defense relied on local solutions. Dikes, barriers, and pumping systems were built incrementally, often in response to specific failures. This approach worked until it did not. The mid-20th century exposed the limits of reactive protection. Storm surges combined with outdated infrastructure created conditions where localized defenses were no longer sufficient. The decision to build the delta works marked a shift in logic. Instead of reinforcing individual weak points, the Netherlands chose to redesign the entire coastal system. This was not a single project, but a coordinated network of dams, storm surge barriers, sluices, and control structures. The goal was not resilience through redundancy alone. It was control through centralization. Water would still move, but it would move within parameters that could be managed. The delta works were designed around worst-case scenarios, extremely low probability events with extremely high consequences. The system assumed that rare failures justified permanent infrastructure, that long periods of inactivity were acceptable, even desirable. This shaped both the physical and administrative structure. Barriers were oversized. Margins were conservative. Components were designed to withstand conditions they were unlikely to encounter. The system was not optimized for efficiency. It was optimized for certainty. This meant accepting high fixed costs in exchange for long periods of inactivity. Operational decisions were embedded into the design itself. When to close a barrier? Under what conditions? Who had authority? These questions were resolved in advance. In this sense, the delta works are less a set of structures than a codified decision-making framework built into concrete and steel. Building the delta works was not a singular effort. It unfolded over decades. Individual components were completed at different times under evolving engineering standards and political priorities. Some structures were revised mid-construction as environmental and economic considerations changed. The system absorbed these adjustments without losing its core logic. What mattered was not architectural consistency, but functional continuity. Once built, each component committed the system to its own maintenance. Dams required inspection, barriers required testing, control centers required staffing. Construction was only the beginning of a much longer obligation. Unlike many infrastructure projects, the delta works were never meant to be finished in a conventional sense. They entered service the moment they were completed and remained there indefinitely. Over time, the nature of the delta works changed, not because of failure, but because of success. As decades passed without catastrophic flooding, the system faded into the background of daily life. Its presence became assumed rather than questioned. At the same time, new factors emerged. Environmental considerations reshaped how water management was understood. Economic priorities shifted. Climate models introduced new uncertainties without offering definitive thresholds. The Delta works were not dismantled or replaced. They were integrated into a broader management framework. Their role narrowed from transformational infrastructure to baseline protection. The system moved from construction to stewardship. Today, the Delta works remain fully operational. They are monitored continuously. Sensors track water levels, pressure, and structural integrity. Control centers review data and maintain readiness. Most days, the system does nothing. Readiness is maintained through repetition rather than urgency. Exercises are scheduled. Components are tested under controlled conditions. The goal is not to simulate disaster, but to ensure that response remains procedural. Nothing about the system depends on improvisation. When intervention is required, it follows predefined sequences rather than judgment calls. Barriers remain open. Water flows freely. Shipping and tidal movement proceed as normal. Intervention is rare. Much of the work supported by the Delta works is procedural rather than reactive. Planning, coordination, inspection, and maintenance define the daily routine. The pace is steady, designed to minimize disruption rather than respond dramatically. The system is active precisely because it is not acting. Infrastructure designed to prevent rare events must justify its existence differently than systems designed for constant use. The Delta works continue to function because the cost of failure remains unacceptable. Even as probabilities are debated, consequences are not. Replacing the system would require rebuilding not just structures, but institutional confidence. Dismantling it would transfer risk back to local defenses that were intentionally superseded. The system persists because it still fulfills its core purpose, reducing uncertainty. It does not eliminate risk, it bounds it. This is not inertia, it is structural commitment. The Delta works represent a class of infrastructure that is rarely discussed once completed. Their success creates no visible output. There are no daily indicators of performance. The only signal that matters is continuity. As long as nothing happens, the system is working. This creates a paradox. The more effective the system becomes, the harder it is to perceive its value. Maintenance replaces memory. Routine replaces urgency. The Delta works were built to solve a problem permanently, knowing that doing so would make the solution invisible. The Delta works were never meant to be experienced. They were meant to remain ready. Their structures stand along the coast, maintained and monitored, intervening only when thresholds are crossed. Most of the time, they wait, not as monuments, not as responses, but as systems designed to never need attention. And that is what they continue to do.